Hello, welcome back. I'm Aidan Swan, and this is Ink for Artists, where I test ink from the point of view of an artist. Today, we are testing Diamine Ochre. I got my sample courtesy of Right Gear, of course. On opening the sample, you can already see that beautiful translucent burnt orange shade. I'm going to thoroughly enjoy this. Ochre is one of my absolute favourite colours. I use it extensively in my art, and most of my wardrobe's ochre too. It's a colour that just sings to me. So I'm a little bit biased here, and I was very excited to try this ink. Ochre doesn't just refer to one shade. It's actually a mineral that's been used in art by humans for tens of thousands of years, and it comes in hundreds of shades, from white through to yellow, even blues and purples, depending on where in the world you are. The red-orange ochre is, however, the most famous shade of ochre, and it's my favourite. It's the ochre I forage locally in order to make my handmade inks that I use in my work. As always, the pen I'm using is antique silver with an original antique nib, and the brushes are Winsor Newton's Series 7 Kalinsky Sable and Raphael's Soft Aqua Imitation Squirrel. So let's start. I'm going to put down some ink for our wet on dry test, and then some water for the wet on wet. Now, Diamine inks are absolutely foolproof. I love them so much, you know exactly what you're going to get with them. So it's no surprise that it goes down so smoothly. And you immediately see that burnt orange with touches of chocolate, that classic ochre colour. Let's see how this goes. Oh yes, that's the perfect ochre. It actually reminds me a little bit of betadine. You remember when you used to cut your knee when you were little and someone would put betadine on it? It would end up this really disgusting, gooey, dark brown. But when it's thin, it's that wonderful yellow through to burnt orange shade. Now you can see all of those lovely, cool golds pulling through. And when I add more, it goes all the way through to a very deep chocolate. And adding some water just brings all of the shades back. It brings out all of those yellows and those very cool golds. Now this is a staining ink. As you can see, it does not bruise all the way back. You are still left with a lot of the original shade on your paper. Now let's see with our wet on dry. As with all Diamine inks, it pulls through immediately. It's the perfect ink for a painter. And although you lose a lot of the very deep burnt oranges when pulling it through from a dry ink, you do get all of the apricots coming through. So depending on how you work with this ink, depends on what shades you get. Even though it's a very basic ink, it's a very interesting ink, with many, many different shades and tones within. In bruising it back from a dry state, we leave the water on for a few seconds. There, you can see it's very heavily staining. You can see that very little has actually moved there. So that's something to bear in mind when working it back. Luna's come to say hello. He loves yellows and oranges and thinks that they're just for licking.
Not for eating. Not for eating.
Now let's look at our chromatography. As with the Sailor ink, this ink has actually soaked all the way through my blotting paper. It is a very wet ink. So at the bottom, you get all of those beautiful golds and that vivid, almost neon orange moving through to the chocolate at the top. On the back, it's soaked through to a selection of taupes and apricots, which are very beautiful too. Now, I thought this would be fun to try. This is my handmade ochre ink, made from natural foraged ochre that I've hand ground and made ink out of. I thought it would be fun to test against the Diamine and see how close they've actually got their colours. I'm only going to do a wet on wet here. This ink is incredibly heavy. It's very different to the Diamine since it's hand ground minerals, so the pigment's very large and very heavy, and the ink itself is quite gummy, which I enjoy working with. It's great for layering, and I find it very interesting. When you add water to it and you open it up, you get all the granulation coming through. So texture aside, I think the colour between the natural ochre and the Diamine ochre is perfect. I think that Diamine got the colour absolutely spot on. A final word about the Diamine. It behaves quite like an oxidizing ink, which I did not expect. In drying, it darkens up a lot and you lose the golds. What comes out is the chocolates and peaches and apricots and a very vivid orange. Not in a bad way at all. It's just rather unexpected. It was September actually, I think, that I started this little protea with the Sailor ink, and I'd hoped to finish this painting for Halloween. But everything else got in the way, which is fine. So I'm finishing it now, and it's closer to pumpkin season here at the moment anyway than it was then. So let's get to our protea and pumpkin. I'm using many different inks in this little painting, and I'll list them all in the write-up below so you can see what I used. But the base of the pumpkin, of course, is the Diamine Ochre. The shading I got with this ink, it's just marvellous. I absolutely loved it. It's the most beautiful natural orange ink that I have found. It's not one of the garish, unnatural bright oranges, which definitely have their place and they're wonderful to use, but this is a perfect natural orange. I definitely see it finding a place in many artists' palettes. Just a note that none of the footage here is speeded up. This is the actual speed I was working at. I wanted to test myself with this work and to work much faster and looser than I usually do. And it was great just sort of letting go and going for it for a change instead of getting lost in the details like usual. I'm going to finish this little painting the same way I do my other work, with gold leaf and verdigris. I'm not going to give away all of my secrets of what I'm using for the glaze and the verdigris. I've got to keep some mystery. What I'm using for the highlights here is Sennelier and Daniel Smith gouache. They're both wonderfully smooth gouache that just works so well with the ink for highlights, and the ink doesn't soak through and discolor it. I'm working with a mixture of gold and copper leaf because I love the movement in tones and I love the life it gives to a painting. I had enormous fun with this little painting, and I hope you enjoyed watching. Have you tried Diamine Ochre? Would you like to try it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please let me know. And I'd also love to hear what you would like to see me review. If I possibly can, I will. Here he is, our Protea and Pumpkin. Final thoughts on this ink is that I would say it's a fantastic addition to any artist's ink collection. I'd say you'll definitely find a use for it somewhere. I would love to thank all of my wonderful, wonderful patrons. You guys are amazing. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it was useful to you and that it was a little pool of calm in this absolutely crazy world. I'll see you next time.